Sam, let me ask you something. And we've gotten answers all over the place last week. And it's a fascinating question because we all want Nebraska football to kind of make this jump, and we think we like the roster, and we kind of just been breaking it down. So I went back and I'm just kind of looking at teams in the conference, right? If Nebraska wants to make a move, and the way that I've kind of said it is the middle of this conference is very, very thick. It is just a
Yes.
lot of good interchangeable teams, and if Nebraska is going to make a move, it is going to be tough sledding. So let me ask you a couple of things about trajectory in terms of the conference. If Nebraska is going to have some success, so if you who are your top 4 teams? You don't have to put them in order, but if you concede Oregon, Penn State, and Ohio State as the top 3 in the conference, who's 4 and 5 for you?
Illinois.
Okay.
And at this moment, USC.
Okay, so ahead of Michigan. Fine.
You're talking next year, right?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Oh.
So that's 2 out of 3 that have said Illinois and USC, right? Because BC said the same thing.
Yep.
All right, so if Nebraska's going to make a move, Sam, is their trajectory this year above or below UCLA?
Above.
Above or below Indiana?
Above.
Ooh, above or below Rutgers?
Above.
Above or below Minnesota?
Above.
Above or below Washington?
Above.
Above or below Iowa?
Above.
Wow. That is Brian Christopherson-esque from 2 weeks ago. So if that's the case, that would put Nebraska in kind of that 6-7-ish category. So
yes.
If
you're talking about making a move.
Okay. So okay, I like the context, and you can clarify along the way just so we're not misrepresenting you.
I'm not saying they're going to finish 6 or 7. I'm saying that you asked me if their trajectory is on the upward swing, where would they finish? They would finish in the top 6.
Okay. So in your opinion, to get into that top 5, would Nebraska be considered a dark horse?
For what?
To get into the top 5 of the Big Ten.
Like a dark horse pick to get into the top 5?
Yeah, of the Big Ten Conference.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think they can. I think they can do that. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that something? So the sentiment is, and you're so far you've been very. There's no him hawing around, right? Like there's no hand wringing, no consternation, no.
I think Matt Rule feels the same way.
Interesting.
Doesn't he?
I would agree.
Don't you think? Matt Rule feels he can do that?
I think he really likes this football team. I do. I agree with. I think he really likes this football team. I'm trying to establish where, as a fan base, we think this football team is heading into this season. Because
I get it.
Yeah, because you're very, very, like you easily said yes to Minnesota and yes to Iowa. And we haven't had very good success against those teams. And I caught myself last week, Sam, saying,
right.
I'm like, I used to say, can they beat Wisconsin and Iowa in the same year? Now I'm like, if Nebraska wants to make a move, they got to beat Minnesota and Iowa in the same year, right? So it's just a very difficult conference in the middle.
Yes, it is. So, I'm not saying they're going to beat Minnesota. I'm saying that if they're the team that they want to be, then they will have done that.
Mm.
Yep. So, I'm not saying that Nebraska's going to beat them because, quite honestly, they haven't beaten Minnesota in Minneapolis in 10 years.
Yeah.
So, just to be clear, to
That's
be who they want to be, they have to do certain things. If you told me that Nebraska beat Minnesota at Minnesota, first of all, that'd be a really good win. Then they beat Iowa, and they don't play Indiana. But if you told me they beat Minnesota and they beat Iowa, I'm telling you that they beat Maryland. I don't know if they're going to beat Michigan, although, I think it'll be a close game. Michigan State is a tough one. We'll see. I think I'd say that they're not favored to beat Penn State, and I think right now, we'll see with USC. I think USC could be quite good. We'll just have to see, and that'll be a fun game at Memorial Stadium. So, But to go where they want to go, they'll finish 9-3 or 10-2 this year. If they're on the trajectory that Matt Rule wants them on, they could go 7-5, which means they lose to Minnesota and they lose to Michigan and they lose to USC and they lose to Penn State and then they lose some other game to someone else. But yeah, that's kind of where they could very easily finish 7-5. That would not stun me. I think it would disappoint them because I think they feel like they got to get on their horse a little bit, and I think they're right. I think where the sport is going, winning in the next 2 or 3 years is pretty important. And I could probably see my way to saying they'll have a better overall team next year than they do this year, but they got a good enough team this year to win 9 or 10 games, and now it's up to them to do it.
So, Sam, here's the $1 million question: is you laid out the case for if they do make kind of that jump next year, how that has to look. What is your, I don't know if confidence is the right word, maybe probability in your mind on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 10? What do you think the chances of that actually happening are?
I need to talk more, I think, to the coordinators, and I need to have a sense of, I feel like I need more data, and that may mean that I need a non-conference season. I don't know.
Fair.
Like I got to see what that defense is. I got to see what John Butler's able to cook up with Phil Snow in the offseason here, and what they're able to create. Look, at this point in time, the defensive line should not be better than last year's. It shouldn't. I mean, and that's not a knock on anybody. That's, give me a year, give me 2 years with Riley Van Poppel and Cam Ledhart, Williams Guarnieri, and it could be better. But you can't guarantee that right now, given the fact they lost Ty and Nash and Jamari Butler. That's hard to prove.
And MJ Sherman.
And MJ Sherman, right. So, what you'd have to have be true is McCullough would have to be as good as Sherman. Elijah Judy would have to be as good as Hutmacher. Cam Lenhart would have to be as good as Butler. And somehow Van Poppel would have to be as good as Robinson right now. And that's just not fair to Riley, even though I think he's going to be quite a good player. Very good. So, that's hard to say. So there's your defensive line. They seem to think their linebackers are great. We'll see. I do think they're going to have a special secondary if everybody stays healthy. And then I do think their offense is going to get better. Now does it get, how much better does it get? Because the offenses in this league are going to get better too. Michigan State's going to play some football. I've told people that many times now. Their coach can coach. Now, he is not the flashiest guy in the world, and he's not necessarily the greatest recruiter. But they will score 28 points on you in a blink next year if you're not careful. That guy knows how to call plays. He comes from a really good offensive family tree. And they will come in here and score 28 points on Nebraska if Nebraska is not careful. So, that team's going to be good. Minnesota's not going to be a joke. All these things. The Big Ten is really, really good. I keep trying to tell people that. And I think people sometimes think it's still 2011 and 2012 when Urban Meyer hadn't really taken over yet. But the league at this point is way, way better than it was when Bo got into it. And so people should take note. Nebraska is actually a pretty darn good football program. You put Nebraska in the Big 12, and I might take Nebraska to win it. And I'm not exaggerating. But they're not in the Big 12. They're in the Big 10. And that's a whole different kind of league, and it's going to be a heck of a challenge.
Sam, at the risk of opening a can of worms here, when you talk about the defensive line, because I've been very passionate about this, when you say
he's been on the warpath all morning, Sam.
When you say better, what do you mean? Because I look at there's some stats and there's some tape that I look at and I go, there's some areas I don't love, not just last year, but over the course of several years in terms of disruptive and explosive plays. And I go, okay, I get Ty Robinson's really, really good. And I'm not taking anything away from Ty Robinson. But I go down the line, I go, okay, can any of the guys you name get 5 sacks? Because that's what we're talking about for the next best pass rusher on the team last year outside of Ty Robinson. And can anybody on those team or anybody out there get 5 tackles for loss? Because that's what we're talking about for the second or third best tackles for loss on the team last year. So I sit here and I go, okay, I know that we love Ty Robinson and for good reason. But as a disruptive unit, I sit here and I go, I think this team coming into 2025 can be more disruptive than the team that left 2024. And so when you say better, like, what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
And Damon can elaborate on this too. There's a combination of quality of player and also scheme. And so, sometimes you can scheme your way into TFLs. It's not perfect, but you can scheme your way into that stuff. And so those are numbers on a page. And what I would say is that Nebraska's, however you want to call it, Bo used to call it like a sort of like an interlocking wall. You build a run wall, is the way Pelini used to talk about it. Carl used to talk about it this way too. And Nebraska's run wall in the last couple of years, in my opinion, has been pretty good. Not perfect. Certainly USC did some things that were nice, and there were some other teams that did too. But they built, in my opinion, pretty good run walls. And I think that Nash Hepmucker is a hard guy to move. And I think Ty Robinson is actually pretty explosive for his size. And Jamari Butler had some incredible games. Not every game, but he had some incredible ones. And so, when you watch what Ohio State did in the playoff, and then you watch what Nebraska did to Ohio State, Nebraska had good defensive linemen. Now, they weren't always consistent, but they had good ones. And so I think that's some of it, is the ability to withstand the constant beating that teams put on you. And I thought Nebraska's defensive line last year had depth. So not only did you have the frontline guys, but then Elijah Judy could trot onto the field, and he could be the second string guy. Well, who's the guy behind Elijah Judy this year? Sua Lefatu, Dylan Parrott, these are good players, but I don't know that they're as good as Elijah Judy was last year's backup. And so some of it's depth, some of it is, quality of play. So that's asking a lot of Van Poppel to be as good as Robinson. I do think Cam Lenhart can be as good as Butler, but Butler had his moments, really special moments over the last two seasons. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch. Certainly, again, Damon can unpack this over the many months ahead. But what John Butler has planned, what Phil Snow is going to help with, what that defense is going to try to do, is they're going to try to create more pressure on the quarterback.
I think that's the part that he likes with this D-line. In listening to Ravi the last handful of weeks, I think he's thinking scheme plus ability for havoc. Because they keep talking about affecting the quarterback, right? And some of it is with pre-snap looks, some of it is,
and that's not something Nebraska's been very good at for a while.
I think so it's interesting, Sam. If I give you a year 2 McGahee, year 2 Shavers, hyphenated
3,
Trent,
Lenhart, year 3 Van Poppel, year 4,
you get
5,
Javen, you get Bowers, like those guys playing behind and fitting and schematically can dramatically affect what your D-line is able to do, because I do think they may be twitchier up front than a year ago.
Yeah, that's possible. I think the flip side of the coin for me is if a team decides, okay, we're just going to go ahead.
We're going to tank you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other option, is that teams are like, okay, so we can't – and I'm not saying Cincinnati can do this, because Cincinnati probably can't. But there are teams like Michigan that can just say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put 2 tight ends on the field. We'll have one of them offset. And, but we can bring him in as an inline blocker, and we're just going to run at you. And we're not going to run for 300 yards. We're going to run for 189, but we're going to control 38 minutes of the clock, and we're going to win the game 17-10. Now, the numbers don't look weird in a game like that, but you lost the game because you couldn't get them off the field because they controlled the line of scrimmage. That's the thing that I feel like, and Sharon Moore is a good coach. He is, whether he coaches that game or not. He understands that. And Jim Harbaugh understood it. And consistently, Michigan understood that, okay, we're going to take your twitchiness away by just rolling out a 283-pound tight end and just hammering at you for 4 quarters. And that's how they've beaten Ohio State many years in a row. Not because they have better athletes in Ohio State, but because they have a smarter strategy and they understand the line of scrimmage. And so Nebraska, that's what I mean, is that Nebraska's got to be able to figure those moments out too. And if you're talking pass rushing skill sets, the most talented pass rusher they had left. And that wasn't James Williams. It was Prince William Yellow. Now he's going to end up being a 1st or 2nd round pick at Mississippi. Now it was I don't think it was Nebraska's fault that he didn't completely contribute at Nebraska.
And I'm not going to bash anybody, but I think with Princewell, I think rigor and the ability to do something day to day. Listen, I'm not going to tell you he's not a top 3 round talent. I'm just saying, like, the rigor has to match.
Yes, agree. So you put it perfectly. I'm just saying that he had the ability.
Yeah.
So when we talk about twitchiness, it's not just that.
Are you sure it's not Shavers?
That he might not be the most talented.
The most natural pass rusher.
Right, but he's doing that from 6 yards away. Unless, and again, you know more than I do. It's possible they'll bring him down to the line of scrimmage, and
certainly McGahee will be.
He's pass rushing from depth.
Yeah.
So he's pass rushing from 6 yards away. I think in 2011, if somebody can go look this up, Levante had like 5 or 6 sacks doing that. Pass rushing from depth. They used him that way. He was great. Eckler would know how they used him because he was there and he recruited Levante. So, yeah, can Vincent Shavers do what Levante did? Well, ideally, sure. Yeah, that would be great if he was able to do that. So it's possible that he's the best one. But what you want is you want it to be Deshaun McCullough. You want it to be Willis McGahee the fourth. You want it to be Cam Lenhart. You want it to be somebody on the line of scrimmage so that – because, as people know, if you're pass rushing from 6 yards away, then people can see you more easily. So, I don't know. And again, John Butler, I think, is regarded as something of a genius. He's been given the chance to run the defense. I have little doubt that he will come up with creative things. It's a matter of if it works. And, again, that guy knows everything there is to know about that stuff. And they're going to give him a shot. I think he's going to be fun to watch because I know he's intense. He's intense.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to have to, I remember after the Pinstripe Bowl celebration, everybody's kind of celebrating, and then there's Butler in the back, and he's still, you can tell he hasn't really left the game yet. He's back there just kind of intense, and so it'll be fun to watch him. I think people maybe don't appreciate what's coming with him. He's going to be dynamic, and he will be fiery. And not that Tony White wasn't fiery. He was. But Butler's got a lot. He's an intense guy. Fun to watch.
That's Sam McKewon, Omaha World Herald. Sam, appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, take care.
Thanks, Sam.
That's Sam McKewon from the Omaha World Herald.
You avoided the dreaded my article thought process or question on this rewind.
I did. I was triggered by something else.
D-line?
Yeah, because I'm just okay.
We'll get it on the other side.
Prince Will had half a sack last year. Half.
Context. He's just natural pass rusher.
I understand that, but what good did that do us? If he goes in the first 2 rounds, it's going to be a Shamar Stewart
deal. It was
deal.
just kind of in context to what he was saying, though, about the talent.
That's fine. I'll take Williams in when he's half a sack. I'll take my chances that he has more than half a sack.
Do you know how you can get past having this conversation? Like when Mac asks a really the most talented player in a class to leave and nobody cares?
Yeah.
You win.
That's or because
nobody brings the fact up that he showed a guy at the door whose highlight film was the best that maybe had ever been on Creighton's campus.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Because they won.
So if you get guys that can rush the passer and have more than 4 or 5 sacks as the second
or half a sack
as the sack guy, nobody will talk about, especially if Prince Will gets drafted. He's got a long way to go to get drafted.
Yeah.
But I think Sam was just simply saying
from a talent standpoint,
he's a very draftable talent.
But you know what I don't care about? Talent that doesn't get me anywhere. So
let it go.
There was something that he brought up. If let's say I'm right, and because he sort of entertained that, hey, maybe they're more twitchy, maybe they're more better at impacting the quarterback. But on the other side of things, our team's going to line up and just try and punch him in the face if that's the case. So I'm looking at their schedule, and I'm trying to figure out.
There's only 3
where that would happen: Michigan,
mm-hmm.
Iowa,
mm-hmm.
Minnesota.
Correct.
That's it. Right?
Where I think it would be intentional to line it up.
Where they just say, hey, if you're going to try and play us like this, we're going to just punch you in the face.
I thought about that.
And see what happens.
Probably about 4 months ago when I saw the schedule.
Is it a given that they would lose those 3 games if those teams play that way?
No.
Right. So that kind of goes to my point that when we say better on defensive line, I don't really know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I do think they have the potential to be more disruptive. I was being, tongue in cheek with Prince Will, but that is a guy that we talk about a lot for a guy that didn't play or produce a lot, like as a big loss. Like MJ Sherman's a bigger loss than Princewell. Jamari Butler.
From a production standpoint, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're just talking production.
Yeah, because I get that Princewell's talented, but if that talent doesn't turn into anything, then I've got Shamar Stewart, and I'm mad that he gets drafted in the first round, right? Like, if I'm a Texas A&M fan, you think I love the Shamar Stewart experience?
If you're Cleveland, are you loving the Shamar Stewart
experience? I don't.
Hey, do you think you're going to get that contract signed?
You know what I mean?
I mean, I hope so. I would like to. Wow. This is what we're on, Shamar?
So, yes, I'm talking about production.
A little early for that.
And, yes, there is a difference between talent and production. I can recognize that, and we can have that conversation another day, or later today if we have time. But I look at it, I go, okay, and even Jamari. You bring this up with Jamari a lot. We didn't get Ohio State Jamari for the whole year, whether that's injury, whatever that was, right? I know that was a guy that wasn't playing healthy a lot of the time. But
did I say Cleveland?
Shamar? Yeah, I think so.
It's the other B team.
That's fine.
Bungles.
They kind of bungled some things. Like, Jamari Butler had 2 sacks last year. He only had 5 QB pressures the whole year. Like, I'm not sitting here and saying there's a ton of production to be replaced with a lot of these guys. Yes, Ty Robinson is a big ask. But that's about the only guy we're really talking about when we say this. Nash, for as much as we love him and for as good as he was playing banged up, his production wasn't what we thought it could be last year.
And I'm the one that had to tell you when people were being hard on him that there was he's hurt.
He's banged up, which is totally fair. But I'm looking at Jamari, I'm looking at Princewell, I'm looking at all these guys, and I go, this isn't really what we thought it was. We liked a lot of these guys, and some of them were productive at various points. But we think of Jamari, we think of Ohio State. We don't think of the other 11 games.
Yeah, and if I was going to pick at that segment, that's probably not where I would start. Because
which part then? Where would you pick?
With what they're having to replace who's no longer on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have 2 guys.
John Bullock?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
So you have 2 guys coming in that will play more that are really gifted pass rushers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Shavers and McGahee.
Absolutely.
I mean,
that's part of the reason I'm so high on this group. I love those guys.
Like, and Shavers will play inside.
Yeah.
But
he's going to get his opportunities to.
And I'm going to take Coach Butler at his word. During the coaching clinic, he says, hey, one of the keys to being a good defensive coordinator, guys, is let your guys do what they're good at.
Mm-hmm.
I should probably let Shavers get after the passer.
Yeah, probably.
So if you use him as an example,
he is disruptive.
I'm probably thinking you're going to do what you say you're going to do and use him to get after the passer.
Absolutely.
I also know McGahee was
a monster,
potentially really good situationally. Yeah. Now, here's the thing, with Coach Simpson, and Coach TB Terry, you got to stop the run.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's a reason that they say you have to earn the right to get after the passer.
Yep. Because you got to do the other stuff first.
And it's not, and I want people to hear what they're saying. It's not, we're not going to let you rush the passer because you're not good at the quarterback or stopping the run. It's in order to dial up pressure, you have to be in advantageous situations sometimes, which typically starts with people being behind the sticks.
Yeah, you got to get him into 2nd and 3rd and long.
That happens
by stopping the run. More often
than not. So he's not just saying.
Yeah, he's not being some weird authoritarian whatever, like, hey, if you don't do this thing that I care about, you don't get to do the thing you want to do. It's from a practical standpoint.
See, Josh, I think Sam made just the opposite point. He said he made a good point with the depth. Not really. They're deeper this year. They didn't play a ton of guys last year.
Yeah,
what are we talking about in the interior?
Tony's brought that up that they didn't rotate a ton last year.
No, I don't.
They really didn't play anybody. They didn't play a ton of guys last year.
Cam kind of disappeared.
Yep. Princewell disappeared.
Princewell didn't play.
Yeah. Jamari was banged up.
Situationally, like, how did we find Parrott? We found him last year because of that.
Yeah.
We had to play Ochoa last year because of that.
And we kind of like Ochoa. And we
weren't really sure what we were getting with Judy. And we certainly didn't play Keona.
I'll say, that's the guy we didn't even bring up yet. My favorite guy on the line.
Yeah, I actually think it's just the opposite.
I think there's way more depth this year.
I think they have significantly more depth.
Yeah. Now they had some of the.
I'm not even sure it's close.
They had some of the same bodies last year, but they didn't use them.
So I think from the edge guys, sure, because you coid play Jamari.
You threw James Williams in there.
James,
very situationally.
Yeah, and James would tell you he ain't playing enough. And
maybe it's where he's somewhere else now.
And MJ, but interior, like from a 5 to a 5 tech, yeah, I don't. It ain't deeper. I know. I couldn't disagree more.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of depth on the D line this year. I think there's a lot of explosiveness and twitchiness on the defensive line this year.
I think it's important. I'm going to say this.
You're replacing a monster.
I'm saying this like I said it a month ago. You have to replace production, not the bodies.
Yes.
So the bodies they have, you have to be as productive. But I do agree with Sam that you can't just naturally say they're going to have a better D-line.
Sure.
But I've said that too. Yeah. That's where you and I will go back and forth over that. But again, I said this before, more capable bodies, sure. Because I mean, with Cincinnati, if you're just talking about the opener, you've got a good returning experienced quarterback. You've got a couple of draft picks that you're going to have to face on the D-line, their D-line. And you got to be able to get after them having to replace 4 starters along the offensive line. Veteran wide receiving core. So if you're just talking about, and we got a long time to get into that matchup.
Yeah.
But that one's not going to be predicated so much on stopping the run.
No.
But you're going to have time to get into it.
But Cincinnati's probably not going to try and pound it down your throat.
But I do agree. And there's a couple teams we're leaving out too with the what I think have crafty run games, like Michigan State, UCLA. Because you just don't know what you're going to get with them, because UCLA I know wants to run the ball, and now that they have a quarterback that can run the ball, that changes their run game tremendously. But you don't get them until game 8 or whenever that is in Pasadena.
Game 10 or so. It's the last third of the season.
You're okay there.
Well, and you also don't know, okay, you got a new OC, so you don't know what you're getting out of UCLA necessarily there. A guy that has not been a full-time play caller before, so you go in Sunseri, right? So you don't have, you don't really know what you're getting out of UCLA. You don't really know what you're getting because of Nico and whatever that situation is and what they want their offense to be. There's a lot of variables with some teams that potentially could try and maybe run it at you a little bit and get creative, that I really don't know if that's how they're going to end up playing it. But I mean, there's a lot of guys we haven't even talked about. We brought up Mason Goldman once or twice over the last couple of weeks. That's a guy that had more production than Princewell did.
No, I understand.
There's a lot of guys that we focus on, a lot of the guys that didn't produce that much. That's kind of my point. And there's a lot of guys left that I think are equally as talented that already have produced more than some of the guys that were upset about leaving. It really just comes down to, can you replace Ty Robinson in the aggregate? And I don't know if they can or not. I think they can.